The new CSEA contract ratified by workers this week is designed to avoid layoffs. However, it only covers part of the $450 million worth of workforce savings that was actually included in this year's budget. And that means that the acrimony between Governor Cuomo and the various unions that represent state workers is probably not over. But does a contract victory with the largest union improve Cuomo's hand with labor, at least in the short term, by making future negotiations easier? We're going to take that question to our insiders. They are veterans of state politics who join us each week to share their thoughts and their musings on the goings-on at the Capitol. With me tonight is Bob Bellafiore, who served as press secretary for Governor Pataki. Bob is now the vice president of partner services for the National Heritage Academies, which operates charter schools. And over here, we have Steve Greenberg, Steve, who formerly worked for 2 Assembly speakers, and he is now the president of Greenberg Public Relations. He's also a pollster for Siena Research Institute. Thank you both for your time. And we're out of time for this segment because it takes so darn long to introduce y'all with your accolades and titles and everything.
And then filling in like that certainly helps as well.
I'm just Liz Benjamin, host of Capitol Tonight.
Yes.
On a good day.
Yes, Madam Host.
Anyway, okay, so seriously, this CSEA deal, it's in the very least is good for Andrew Cuomo because the opposite would have been bad.
Well,
there you are. That is some serious.
No, was that a thought or amusing?
Clearly amusing.
Very amusing.
Just speak, Greenberg, please.
Look, this was good for all sides involved because it's good for the governor not to have a war with one of the more powerful unions in the state, but it's also good that X thousands of state workers are not going to get laid off.
Right.
But for now, although written into this agreement, as I understand it, is that there cannot be layoffs other than for certain specific circumstances. So the real question is going to be, even assuming for the moment that PEF, the second largest union, which has already agreed to a similar deal with the governor, even if they approve it, how does he get these extra workforce savings that were budgeted in the state budget?
Right. The PEF leaders have agreed to the deal.
Right.
The PEF rank and file.
Right. Exactly. It has to be voted on.
Right.
No, I agree with Stephen. I think this is better for the governor. Certainly better for the governor than having the contract rejected. But this is an important step in reining in employee costs for the government, and that's important. I think it does set a standard for what other contracts will look like going forward, and frankly, that's a recognition among the public employee workforce that things have to change. I mean, people in the private sector have been paying an increased amount of their health care costs and other benefit costs for years.
If they're employed, lucky enough to be employed.
That's right, and I think you saw some of that commentary from union members in some of the news coverage. That look, I'm happy to be working.
Right.
And that is a reality.
Unemployment at 9 and change percent. Nationally, slightly lower here, but still.
This is a lousy time to be on the street.
Yeah, it is really.
No, and I think that's right. I mean, it is good to start reining in costs. To me, there's two things. One is, how do they find the extra savings that they need for the budget to keep budget balanced? But secondly, from a purely political point of view, this was a win for the governor, big time, because he can now say, look, I've reined in costs, I've reached a deal that provided no increases, zeros, give-backs, health care, etc., but he did it in a way very different than Governor Christie in New Jersey, Governor Walker in Wisconsin, other governors around the state. He didn't do union bashing.
Right.
Yet he really didn't. He threatened. He used the carrot and stick in terms of layoffs if you don't approve.
Collective bargaining, which is like the sacred cow.
Right, but he also didn't go after. He didn't do union bashing.
Yeah, I mean, look, the problem here is that CSEA didn't endorse him, right, in 2010, might not going forward. And if, in fact, you want to go forward on a national level, you need the boots on the ground, you need labor, and we all know that primaries are really driven by the people in the extremes. We're seeing that with the presidential GOP situation, which we'll get back to, but we saw it with like a guy like Howard Dean, who's incredibly liberal, couldn't have gotten as far as he did if it was not for these true believing types. I mean, Andrew Cuomo, if he wants to run for president, he's not going to make it through some of these states.
Well, two things. One, that's a long time from now.
Yeah, I know.
Several lifetimes.
And as his father used to say, between now and then a pope could be born, which is to say anything can happen.
Right.
And two, I don't think Andrew Cuomo's presidential aspirations live or die based on whether CSEA makes phone calls.
No, I
for
mean,
him.
yeah, but unions do watch this sort of thing. You think that national unions aren't paying? AFSCME is not paying
But
attention.
that's the point. That's why he came out of this unscathed. He got a political good deal for the state, a good fiscal deal for the state, and he preserved the political side for himself.
And the deal, P.S., is not too terrible. I mean, they do still have step increases, right? And they do, yes, they're giving more for health, but there's not zero increases for 5 years. They do get some raises at the end of the contract.
But there's zero increases for 3 years,
Yes,
and in
I
the
know.
first 2 years there's
There's furloughs, but they get some of that money back.
They get
at the
some of
back
it back,
end.
absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, it's just not a terrible. It's painful, but
But that's the point. It was a fair deal. I mean, you heard Danny Donahue say it. You heard the governor say it. It was a fair deal. Both sides gave a lot.
And it reflects the economic realism in New York right now.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh, that's true. Okay.
And I'll tell you, if you look out 3 years to the gubernatorial race, the CSEA endorsement, one, obviously meant nothing to Andrew Cuomo last year
Yeah,
because he ran without
because
it.
he ran against Carl Palladino. What if he runs against somebody who's actually got a chance?
I don't think a CSEA endorsement is as valuable for a Democrat incumbent governor as it is for a Republican challenger, right? Because then, if a public employee union endorses a Republican over an incumbent Democrat, then it's sort of man bites dog.
And they endorsed your boss once upon a time, or your former boss, I should say,
Right.
many bosses ago.
Yes.
Speaking of things that there's a long time between then and now, which means that there will be a lot of stories written, and one that actually probably got under the administration's skin is this one about the plane. The plane. I mean, I'm sorry, I can't help it. The reality here is this, and you guys got slapped on it. I think Carl McCall actually took a bite out of George Pataki for his use of the plane back in the day. I mean, this is like a perennial. I was surprised they didn't handle it better. They knew it was coming down the pike. They knew.
Yeah, you know, I think when you walk into the governor's office on day one, you go, well, what are the 5 stories we know reporters are going to ask about? They're always going to ask for the payroll. They're always going to ask for the telephone directory so they can walk around and call people blindly and try to sandbag them with questions. And they're going to ask...
Sandbag them with questions.
You're a sandbagger. Go
I
ahead.
am.
Let him go.
I'm sorry, forgive me. Continue.
And they're going to ask about the plane, because the plane is seen, you know, as a perk. George Pataki used it as a campaign issue. Carl McCall tried to use it as a campaign issue against George Pataki. Every governor criticizes his predecessor for using the plane, and then every governor uses the plane.
George Pataki used it as a campaign issue against Mario Cuomo, who got slapped around because he had family members on the plane, okay? But I'm just saying, and then Andrew Cuomo investigated the use of the plane, the leaking of the information by the Spitzer administration, blah, blah. I mean...
I have no issue with the governor using the plane.
Okay,
I think that the governor should be using the plane. He didn't use it to go back and forth to political events. He didn't use it for personal purposes.
He used it to go home, which he's not supposed to do, technically speaking.
Look, as a taxpayer and a voter, I'd rather have a governor getting home safely, getting home more quickly. When he's not like Governor Cuomo does, 3-hour days. Okay, he's not. He's putting in long days.
He is definitely working.
He's traveling across the state.
And you know what he was
he's doing? His job.
He's traveling across the state talking about austerity and then taking the state-funded plane home to Westchester. I think that's what the problem was. That some people said that there was a juxtaposition of these messages. I'm not saying it was or wasn't. I didn't even write the darn story.
That argument would say that government should spend no money.
There are some people, like Ron Paul, I'm sure, thinks that's a great idea.
Well, I honestly, look, okay, so you and Ron Paul.
It's not me,
I agree with Bob to the extent that I have no problem with the governor's use of the plane. Where I have a problem on this is when governors say one thing and do another. When George Pataki criticized Mario Cuomo for Air Cuomo and then uses the plane and the helicopter far more than Mario Cuomo ever did, I have a problem with that. My problem here with Governor Cuomo is not that he's using the plane. I mean, that's a resource that he should be using when appropriate. And as far as I know, and as far as I've seen from any of the media story, nothing was inappropriately done.
It appears that way.
My problem is he talked about transparency in government, openness in government. And what we saw in terms of the way the governor's office handled this issue was anything but transparent. What they should have simply done is said, yes, the governor used the plane. Here are the manifests. Here are the days he flew, where he flew, when he flew,
Who
why
was on
he
the
flew.
plane.
Absolutely.
They redacted information about the names of of the security detail, as if like that's some kind of.
Well,
and then they said
and
it was about safety, after the fact safety.
See, but I'm okay with if they want to redact the names of the 2, 3, 4 state police officers who were on there and just say he was on the plane with 4 state troopers. I'm fine with that. We don't need to know the names of state troopers. What we need to know is, were any family members on there? Were any friends? Were any political contributors? Were any staff? I mean, that's what they should have just laid out, and then this would have been a one day no story.
They trickled it out over the. It was not.
It was not handled well.
Everybody knows that when you get the plain question, you just give over the information. You can do other things. You can delay. You can take your time. You can wait till 4 o'clock on a Friday to give it out. But eventually, you have to give out.
Time-honored tradition.
You eventually have to give out all the information. So I think what the governor's office did was turn a one-day non-story into something that you can still chat about a few days later.
Which we are.
But you know what? A month from now, a year from now, 3 years from now, nobody's going to care.
Okay.
Assuming that they handle this issue better going forward,
because you know it's going
to be an ongoing issue.
Yeah, every 6 months or so. Okay, let us turn to a poll before we run out of time. That you've got a new poll out. It's about the presidential field, and basically, in short, it says Barack Obama dropping like a stone in terms of favorability in Democrat, true blue, dominated New York, which we had seen in other polls, and yet. Still leading.
Right. I mean, it's a bad news, good news poll for Obama. Bad news is his job performance has tanked.
Yep.
In a generic, would you like to re-elect him or would you prefer someone else? The state is evenly divided despite being a 2-to-1 Democratic advantage state. Yet, when we matched him up against 6 potential Republican opponents, against 5 of them, he has really big double-digit leads. The only one that presents a problem for Barack Obama in New York is former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani. There he only has a 50-44 lead. But against Romney, he has an 18-point lead. Against Perry, he's got a 27-point lead. Against Bachmann, he's got a 30-point lead.
Okay. And former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani, who recently said he's going to wait another 2 months before he decides to get into the race, which basically is like, I'm probably not going to do it.
Right.
But I'd like to keep this going a little longer because I really love when you pay attention to me like that. So
the president has 2 things going for him. One is time, the time between now and the next presidential election. He has time to sort of get his footing, re-energize his base, and has time for things to sort of get better in the country. The other thing he has going for him, though, is his opposition. I mean, if I were him...
Says the Republican, just for the record.
Well, right. No, if you look at the Republican field right now, the Republicans are busy playing to a primary base, which is the conservative base.
Yeah.
President had to do that last time, doesn't have to do that this time. He can sit there, he can be in the middle where most of the country is, and let Michelle Bachmann and Rick Perry and whoever else play to the Tea Party in the Republican fringes.
Right.
And the risk he takes, though, is if one of those people catches fire. I mean, George H.W. Bush had phenomenal numbers 18 months out from the election and ended up losing to Bill Clinton in 1992. And so the president does have that risk.
And I mean, Barack Obama saw it in his own campaign. I mean, 18 months out from the election, he was not the presumed Democratic nominee, and he caught fire and rode that to a victory and rode it to the White House. And related to your point that he has time, anybody who tells you they know what the economy of this country is going to look like a year, 13, 14 months from now, they're making it up.
How about next week?
Right. They don't know. So this is going to be a test. Potentially, we could have an incumbent president running for re-election with an unemployment rate of 9% and a terrible economy, or things could get better, in which case that will certainly work to the president's advantage.
Last point, Bob.
There is a 50% likelihood that the biggest issue in the presidential race is something we don't even know about now.
Absolutely.
Could be the plane.
Air Force One.
Thank you, Tattoo.
Great movie.
All right, I'm done. Thank you very much, guys. I appreciate it. Steve Greenberg. Thank you, Bob Valley.